The death of Carnor Jax ended the last direct successor state to the Galactic Empire. With the Imperial ruling council dead, Carnor Jax, Palpatine finally dead, and all the Grand Admirals, with one exception, who defected to the New Republic and who would live out the rest of his retirement, dead, there was really no legitimate central authority left. All that remained was a bunch of fortress worlds. Kind of throughout the galaxy, there were a number of systems or small groups of planets that hadn't fallen to the New Republic. They had immensely powerful fortifications and planetary shields, and some of them held out for years, decades even. So that continued to exist. The Pentastar alignment and some of the Outer Rim territories were limping along, but the vast bulk of the remaining Imperial forces were in the deep core. Now, by this point in time, there was virtually nothing left. The Greater Meldrud had something like 67 Victory-class Star Destroyers, and Blitzer Harsk's Zero Command had something like, I think it was 12 Imperial-class Star Destroyers left. The Uradu Authority and Superior General Sander Delverdes had nothing except for the Nighthammer, which was a Star Dreadnought that he had stripped all of his remaining territories to build, which actually had stealth plating, and theoretically it should have been good, but like all Star Dreadnoughts, it sucked. I don't know what the point of building Dreadnoughts is, because with like the exception of Operation Shadowhand, they seem to die in like really bad ways. I think it's just because plot armor renders super weapons bad, because if you use them in Empire at War, they utterly devastate everything in their path. They can take out entire fleets easily by themselves. So I don't know why they sucked so much, like I said. Anyway, so within the deep core, you kind of had two factions, or kind of two ideologies. Not that it affected unity. You had Sanders Delverdes and Blitzer Harsk, who believed that Imperial reunification was a good idea, and that they were the man to do it. That was actually the reason Delverdes had built the Nighthammer, his Super Star Destroyer, because he thought it would give him it would improve his position to become the next Emperor. Truden Teradok, however, thought that Imperial reunification was a joke, and only cared for increasing his own power at the expense of what remained of the rest of the Empire. So those were kind of the two little sub-factions we had. So moving along, we have a series of events, which I'll just try to summarize. Basically, Han Solo went to Kessel and got kidnapped and taken to the Maw, just to really grossly simplify the whole thing. Now, the Maw exists near Kessel, and it is a cluster of black holes. It's extremely difficult to get through them. You have to basically either have a complex set of guidance maps that only the Empire had, and only very few Imperial officers, including Grand Moff Tarkin and Palpatine, had access to, or you need to be a Jedi, because Jedis can fly ships without using a nav computer, which is kind of interesting. So I just finished Thrawn Alliances, and part of it, Darth Vader flies the Chimera without using the nav computer, using the Force, kind of like a guild navigator. But anyways, so a Star Destroyer shows up and takes Han Solo and company into the Maw. It turns out that the Maw facility is a top-secret Imperial research station under the command of Fleet Admiral Daala. So, we'll talk a little bit about Daala, but so basically the Maw was built by Grand Moff Tarkin. It was where the Death Star was developed. I think this was before we had the retcon where the Death Star was built by the Geonosians. So at this point in time, the Death Star was built at the Maw, or the technology was developed at the Maw. I don't know. We'll just say that it was refined at the Maw, and that's where they built the prototype. So Daala had been left there by Grand Moff Tarkin a decade or so ago, and he had tasked her with building a new superweapon. And in the meantime, they had produced several superweapons, namely the Sun Crusher. The Sun Crusher cost 3 times the amount of the Death Star to build. One of it was its miniaturized systems, the second was resonance torpedoes, and the third was quantum armor. So the quantum neutron armor made it invincible. It would later get shot by the Death Star prototype, and the Death Star super laser just bounced off. It would also survive being put into a gas giant. The resonance torpedoes would either blow a planet up, or it would blow a star up and cause it to go supernova. So that's just how powerful the Sun Crusher was. And then the miniaturized systems. It was about the size of a large fighter. I think it could only carry 4 or 5 people, but it could blow up a star. So it was the most powerful super weapon ever built in the Star Wars universe. More so than even the Death Star. But I digress. So, Fleet Admiral Daala, what's her background? So the Empire was known for its human supremacy. It was very patriarchal because it is a fascist regime, and fascist regimes are very masculine. And she had entered the Imperial Academy and had gotten top marks. Now, given her performance in every campaign to follow, and if you see the title, it's titled Daala's Disasters, given her performance, you gotta wonder, like, how bad the average Imperial soldier was. Now, it is confirmed later on that she actually scored really poorly, or at least it's implied she scored poorly on fleet combat, but she did really well with infantry tactics. However, she received a lot of penalties during her time at the Academy for having no strategy and just throwing ships at things until it was dead. So, she began to anonymously publish papers on the Tarkin Doctrine that received public acclaim. Despite her high graduation, she was given the rank of petty officer, and they assigned her to menial tasks such as food preparation, which is frankly where they should have left her. It would have spared everybody a lot of trouble if she had have never emerged. So they made it to the Maw. What's kind of interesting what happened... Yeah, sorry, so I'm on topic. So Tarkin found out about her. Daala was apparently quite the beauty in her youth. Copper, redhead, etc. And Tarkin developed an affection for her, and she became his lover. Now, it was suggested the only reason that she became an admiral was because Tarkin was really powerful, and she was his mistress. Tarkin responded to that, so he put a man in a spacesuit and had him orbit around a planet while the gravity gradually drew him in. But he never denied the allegations that Daala had been promoted because she was good in bed. So, Tarkin left her in command of the Maw facility and said, "Develop new super weapons, I'll be back." But of course, Tarkin died on the Death Star and he never came back. So, Daala was interrogating Han Solo and she found out Palpatine was dead, the Empire had fallen, all was lost. So she had her 4 Star Destroyers. I think it was like Gorgon, Hydra, I forget what the other ones were, it doesn't matter. They're all named after, generally speaking, Greek mythological creatures. So she decided that her plan was going to be, she was going to wage a guerrilla war against the New Republic, or she called them the Rebel Alliance. She was going to single-handedly bring them down with her 4 Imperial ones. However, as always, her incompetence led to Han Solo breaking out. Him and a Force-sensitive named Kip Dameron. I think that's his name. Anyways, Kip is his first name. But Kip and them broke out of the Maw. They took the Sun Crusher. They actually flew it through the bridge of one of the Star Destroyers, and that caused it to lose its power, and it got sucked into a black hole. So the campaign had even started, and Daala had lost a quarter of her forces, but more disasters would come. Daala needed to win a victory to show everybody that the Empire was still a force to be reckoned with. Sure, she had just lost a quarter of her forces and a super weapon that had taken a decade to develop, but she had a plan. She was going to attack Dantooine, which had just been resettled by the New Republic. They put like 50 refugees there, and they set up a colony. So Daala launched an all-out assault on Dantooine and killed every last refugee. And she declared that as a victory. It would be the sole victory of her career, which I think says something. So her next plan was to attack Mon Calamari, which was still rebuilding in the aftermath of Operation Shadowhand. Now, this was a logical target, to be fair. It was the Republic's largest shipyard. I guess Quat is bigger, but as the Republic was still reliant on Mon Calamari ships, like I said, it was a logical target. So she came up with this plan that she would destroy the shipyards, and she moved, I think it was like one Star Destroyer to position to try to draw out the Mon Calamari defense forces while the other ships were behind the moon. It was some 4D chess plan like that. Unfortunately, it was one of Tarkin's moves, and everybody knew about her, at least Admiral Akbar did, so he he used a droid to pilot an incomplete cruiser and rammed one of her Star Destroyers, blowing it up. Daala had lost half of her strike force without achieving anything. She continued to attack the planet, and lost most of her starfighters. She then jumped into the Cauldron Nebula and tried to come up with a plan. She had to come up with a plan somehow to deal with this whole situation. So her master plan was going to be she was going to ram both of her remaining Star Destroyers into Coruscant and self-destruct them above the Imperial Palace, killing the New Republic's command hierarchy. This brilliant plan, however, was ruined when Kip showed up. He had stolen the Sun Crusher. I forget the exact order of events. It's not particularly important. But when the New Republic had gotten the Sun Crusher, they had studied it, learned as much of its secrets as they could, and they determined it was useless to them because they weren't willing to use torpedoes that would blow up a star. They just thought it was too strong. It wasn't like an Executor class or something where you could use it in normal combat. It was only useful for blowing planets up, and frankly, that was too powerful. Also, anyone who got their hands on it could pilot it and could blow up like Corellia, Quat, and Coruscant. It was just too powerful, and they had no real use for it. So they had thrown it into Yavin 4. Sorry, Yavin. Yavin 4 is a planet surrounding Yavin. However, Kip had used his Force abilities. He got possessed by the spirit of Exar Kun. If you know who he is, he was one of the original Jedi who had defected and formed the Sith. Anyways, so he had used his Force powers to drag it out of Yavin, and he had gone on an offensive against the Galactic Empire. He blew up a planet, but his master plan was he showed up, and he launched a series of resonance torpedoes, which triggered a couple stars to blow up in the Cauldron Nebula while Daala was planning her genius suicide attack. And the resulting supernovas blew up one of her last remaining Star Destroyers and severely damaged the Gorgon. Around this time, the New Republic had launched an offensive at the Maw, hoping to get its secrets. The defenses there activated the Death Star prototype. However, it didn't work out. I think it blew up like one ship. Kip showed up in the Sun Crusher. The super laser hit it and bounced off. Daala showed up in the Gorgon. She managed to download all the remaining data from the Maw and blow it up, and jumped out to the deep core. The New Republic allowed the Sun Crusher to fall into a black hole where it would be lost there for all time. And so Daala's campaign had ended with the loss of the Empire's sole remaining superweapon, the destruction of 3 Imperial-class Star Destroyers. Keep in mind there's only like 20 of them left in Imperial hands by this point in time. And the loss of the Maw with all of its secrets. So that was a very successful campaign. Daala did a really good job on that one. Here, I'm going to show you some pictures of Daala. Actually, that's her from when she gets older. But, yeah, there's Daala back when she was with Tarkin. There's another picture of her. There's a really creepy looking picture of her. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's that's actually not a bad picture of her. Let me scroll down because there's a decent one near the bottom if I recall. Yeah, there we go. That's, I think, the best picture of her I could find. Anyways, so Daala made it to the deep core, and she found that the warlords were fighting there, and she was like, look guys, we have to unite against the New Republic. We're losing the Galactic Civil War. All hope is lost. The only thing we have left is to reunite. So Blitzer Harsk recruited her and said, you're going to lead my fleet and you're going to attack Pterodok and we're going to have it out and this is going to be like our private war. So she goes and attacks Pterodok. Pterodok's second in command was Pelion. And in the middle of the battle, she offers a truce, which Pelion accepts because he's an honorable man and not an asshole. So together they call a ceasefire, and using Pelion's and her standing and respect, they convince all the warlords to go to Tarsk. I can never remember how to pronounce it. Tvarspeakin or something. Anyways, an abandoned space station. So she asks the warlords. Now, kind of something funny is this is the only picture we have of most of the warlords. That's the only picture we have of Sandus Devidaris. That's the only picture we have of Truden Pterodok. That's the only picture we have of Blitzer Harsk. So if you go into Thrawn's Revenge, these are the images they use. So they use like that and that. So it's kind of funny using that as their thing. So Daala brings all the warlords in. She triggers a system that locks the door, and for 3 hours, and she says, elect a new leader, work it out, we need to form an alliance against the New Republic. So they just argue for 3 hours, and Daala gets pissed off. So she had failed once again to create a union. She failed to reunite Imperial forces. So Daala did what Daala always does and threw a brick at it. Fortunately, in this case, it actually wound up working out surprisingly well. She gave Pelion a gas mask, put her own one on, and activated nerve gas, and it killed everybody in the room. Sanders de Verdis managed to make a knife out of his metals, and he tried to kill her. I think Pelion punched him in the face or something. It's not entirely clear. Pterodok took a while to die because he was so fat. The nerve gas took a while to metabolize. And Blitzer Harsk actually survived because of his cyborg implants. However, as he was escaping, he realized that he had multiple personality disorder, and he rammed his shuttle into an asteroid. So Daala's failure had kind of worked out, to be honest. She had managed to unify what was left of the Empire. Taking the Nighthammer as her flagship, she launched a full-scale assault on Yavin 4. Unfortunately, Callista, who is I don't even want to get into. Callista was from the Children of the Jedi trilogy, which was truly horrendous. Although I think... No, wait a minute. Well, anyways, we'll talk about that some other time. But Callista went on to the Nighthammer. She hacked all of the TIE bombers on it. She had them all fire their missiles simultaneously, which blew up the Nighthammer's engines, and the Nighthammer got caught in the gravitational well of Yavin and crashed into it, losing the Empire's last remaining Super Star Destroyer. Well, at least this group of the Empire. So it crashed into the gas giant of Yavin. The Jedi used their powers to disrupt the remaining Imperial Star Destroyers. The New Republic showed up and did a bunch of damage, so they retreated again. Daala had failed once more and lost their Super Star Destroyer while achieving absolutely nothing. Around this time, she realized how much she sucked and how much her command was hurting the Empire. So she said, Pelion, you're in charge now because you haven't screwed up. Everybody you've served under has screwed up, but you're in charge now. She promoted him to full admiral and went into retirement. Daala was not done, though, and she would later return to lead the Empire to yet another disaster, but that's a story for next time. So at this point, the Empire had been unified under Pelion and the remaining Moffs, so we'll deal with that next time. But Pelion immediately said, look, we have to abandon the deep core. The hyperspace routes are constantly shifting. There's not a large enough civilian population here. It's just not viable in the long term. So he decided to abandon the deep core He basically stripped bare everything he could find. He loaded up all the Star Destroyers, complete and incomplete. He loaded as many soldiers, stormtroopers as he could. He did, however, find 2 Super Star Destroyers, the Megador and the Dominion. Now, these were not Executor-class Super Star Destroyers. I don't think it specifies what they were exactly. We do know they were Super Star Destroyers, and we do know that they were... I don't know. In the game Thrawn's Revenge, they portray them as Bellator, which are smaller, more maneuverable ones. But they found 2, and they took them with them, and Pellaeon fled to the Outer Rim, where he annexed the Pentastar Alignment and a bunch of other warlords and formed the Imperial Remnant. There were still a couple Imperial warlords left in the Deep Core, and Daala would return to take command of them again and lead the Empire to yet another disastrous defeat, but that's a tale for another time. So, Daala's failure had ironically kind of put the Empire in a better place than it had been before, although it was still a disaster. And the next 2 times she would show up, Daala's kind of like a retarded version of Batman. She shows up when the Empire needs it and completely screws the pooch, as we'll see next time. Anyways, next time should be the last episode, where we'll cover the Arinda campaign, the final Imperial push, and the Kamasi document crisis. Hope you've enjoyed.